welcome back. So this is Tutor Diane at your service. And for today's video, we're just going to discuss about verbs. Okay, so types of verbs and list of all verb types. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, what is a verb? Verbs are the action words in a sentence that describe what the subject is doing. Along with nouns, verbs are the main part of a sentence or phrase, telling a story about what is taking place. In fact, without a verb, full thoughts can't be properly conveyed, and even the simplest sentences, such as Maria sings, have one. Okay, so our subject is Maria, and our verb here is sings. Okay, so here, when learning the rules of grammar, school children are often taught that verbs are doing words, meaning they signify the part of the sentence which explains the action taking place. Example, he ran away. So he is a subject and run is a verb. She eats chocolate cake on Sundays. She is a subject and eats is a verb. Okay, the horses gallop across the fields. Okay, run, eats, and gallop are the action parts of those sentences. They are the verbs. Okay, so however, it can be confusing because not all verbs are easily identifiable as action. Okay, so for this one, I know your name. So I is a pronoun and know is your verb here and it's not an action word. So Jack thought about it. So Jack is a noun. So thought is your verb here. Okay. So we considered several application. We is a pronoun and considered is your verb. Okay, so here, these are non-action verbs. Non-action verbs, this one, know, thought, and considered. Okay, those that describe a state of being, emotion, possession, sense, or opinion. Other non-action verbs includes loved, agree, feel, and have. Okay, how to recognize a verb? As you can see from the examples above, one clue to help you recognize a verb is its location compared to the subject. Okay, so verbs almost always come after a noun or pronoun. You know, noun or pronoun, of course, subjects of the sentence. Okay, so the verb comes after. These nouns and pronouns are referred to as a subject. Okay, subject in the sentence. The verb thought comes after the noun Jack. So for this example, Jack thought about it. So Jack is a noun and thought here is a verb. So the action Jack subject was taking place was a thinking verb. Okay, so thought is a past tense of think. Okay, so for this one examples, Mark eats his dinner quickly. So Mark is a subject and eats is a verb. Okay, in bold one, this one. We went to the market. You write neatly in your notebook. So here, they thought about all the prizes in the competition. So in bold one, it went, right, thought are verbs. Here are some other ways to recognize verbs in a sentence. Okay, example, if you're not sure if a word is a verb, ask yourself, can I do something? Okay, so for the second one, can I think, wonder, walk, yawn? Yes, so these are verbs. You can also ask, what is happening? Okay, so in the sentence, Mark eats his dinner quickly. What is happening? Eating is happening. So eating is the verb. In the sentence, they thought about all the prizes. What is happening? Thought, thinking is happening. So thought is the verb. Okay, so for the physical verbs, definition and examples. Physical verbs are action verbs. Of course, physical. So action verbs. They describe specific physical actions. If you can create a motion with your body or use a tool to complete an action. Okay, when we say use tool, it is something that we use to complete an action. It may be a machine or a specific tool, a specific thing. Okay, the word you use to describe it is mostly like a physical verb. For example, here, Joe sat in his chair. The dog breathes quickly after she chases her ball. And should we vote in the election? Even when the action isn't very active, if the action is done by the body or tool, consider it a physical verb. Yes, physical verb if it is done by a body or a tool. So, for example, here, physical verb examples. We have let's run to the corner and back. So, run. I hear the train coming. Call me when you're finished with class. Okay, so now let's move on to mental verbs. What are these mental verbs? Definition and examples. Okay, mental verbs have meanings that are related to concepts such as discovering, understanding, thinking, or planning. In general, a mental verb refers to cognitive state. When we say cognitive state, it is something in our brain. Okay, so mental, of course, it refers to our brain. Okay, so mental verb examples we have in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. For this one, I know the answer. So she recognized me from across the room. Do you believe everything people tell you? So this one, know, recognize, believe are examples of mental verb. Okay, so now let's move on to states of being verbs. Okay, so when we say state of being verbs, these are also called be verbs, also known as linking verbs. A state of being verbs describes conditions or situations that exist. State of being verbs are inactive since no action is being performed. Okay, so take note in the be verb, there is no like action being performed. So it is considered as inactive verbs. These verbs forms to be, okay, such as is, are usually complemented by adjectives. Okay, take note, be verbs is, are. They're also called inactive verbs since there is no action that's being performed. So examples here we have I am a student. Second, we are circus performers. Please is quiet. Please is quiet. Okay, so now let's move on to types of verbs. What are those types of verbs? There are many types of verbs. In addition to the main categories of physical verbs, mental verbs, and state of being verbs, there are several other types of verbs. In fact, there are more than 10 different types of verbs that are grouped together by function. Okay, take note that the main categories are physical verbs, mental verbs, and state of being verbs. Okay, so now let's move on to the list of all verb types. Let's get started with action verbs. Action verbs, this is very self-explanatory. So express specific actions that are used anytime you want to show action or discuss someone doing something. It's important to remember that the action does not have to be physical. So, okay, action verb examples we have run, dance, slide, jump, think, do, go, stand, smile, listen. The action verb examples in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. For example, here we have I run faster than David. He does it well. She thinks about poetry all day long. Okay, so that are the example for action verbs. So this one, transitive verbs. When we say transitive verbs, are action verbs that always express doable activities that relate or affect someone or something. Remember, the keyword is doable activities that relate or affect someone or something else. The other things are generally direct objects. Okay, we have direct objects Nouns are pronouns that are affected by the verb, though some verbs can also take an indirect object, such as show, take, and make. So here are the examples. We have loved, respect, tolerate, believe, maintain. So that the transitive verb examples in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. So for this one, Gary ate the cookies. So the transitive verb is ate. Transitive verb is ate. Gary is the subject because it is Gary who is doing the eating. And the cookies are the direct object that was being eaten because it is the cookies that are being eaten. Okay. So here, example, he kicked John. John punches him. They sold the tickets. Examples of verbs used with both direct and indirect objects. They sell him the tickets. In the sentence, the tickets are the direct object, while him is the indirect object. Mary baked her mother a pie. In this sentence, a pie is a direct object, while her mother is the indirect object. Okay, now let's move on to transitive verbs. When we say transitive verbs, are action verbs that always express doable activities. They are different from transitive verbs because there is no direct object. There is no direct object in intransitive verbs. Okay, so here we have intransitive verb examples. We have walk, laugh, path, play, run. The intransitive verb examples in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. From here, we traveled to London. So here, your transitive verb is traveled. The intransitive verb is traveled. The subject is we, of course. This is a pronoun. Because we are doing the traveling, but London is not a direct object because London is not receiving the action of the verb. Okay, so in transitive verb, there is no direct object. Unlike with transitive verb, there is a direct object that receives the action. Okay, so now this one. Examples for intransitive verbs are I sneeze in the morning. He arrived the moment to spare. Catherine sat away from the others. John eats before leaving for school. The last example shows that the verb eats can be both transitive or intransitive depending on whether there is a direct object or not. If the sentence read, John eats the cookies before leaving the school, eats would be transitive as there is a direct object, the cookies. Okay, so by the way, some verbs can be both transitive or intransitive. These verbs include start, leave, change, leave, stop. Okay, now let's move on to auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs are also known as helping verbs, are used together with a main verb to show the verb's tense or to form a question or negative. Common examples of auxiliary verbs include have, might, will. The auxiliary verbs give some context to the main verb. For example, letting the reader know when the action took place. Example here, would, should, do, can, did, could, may. The auxiliary verb examples in the following sentences are in bold. Okay, so here, I will go home after football practice. Okay, the auxiliary verb will is telling us that the action of the verb go is going to take place in the future. Okay, it's future tense after football practice has ended. If the auxiliary verb will has removed, we get the sentence, I go home after football practice. In this case, there is no definite time frame for the action. The sentence suggests that going home after football practice is just something the subject I generally does. Examples here, I may dance with you later. We did consider Brian's feelings. Jenny has spoken her final words. In addition, we can sometimes use the auxiliary very before the pronoun to make a question. Might you dance with me later? Okay, this one is for the asking question. Did we consider Brian's feelings? Has Jenny spoken her final words? Also, auxiliary verbs are used to help form negative statements with the use of words like not and never. These will usually split the auxiliary and main verbs. I may never dance with you again. We did not consider Brian's feelings. Jenny has not spoken her final words. Okay, so that are the examples for auxiliary verbs. Now let's move on to stative verbs. Stative verbs can be recognized because they express a state rather than an action. Okay, they typically relate to thoughts, emotions, relationships, senses, states of being, and measurements. Okay, these are stative verbs. Okay, the best way to think about stative verbs is that there are verbs that describe things that are not actions. The stative verbs are all expressing a state of doubting, a state of believing, a state of wanting. These states of being are often temporary. The stative verb examples in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. The doctor disagrees with your analysis. Disagree is a stative verb here, as it describes the doctor's state of being, which is disagreement. Okay, John doubts the doctor's opinion. I believe the doctor is right. She wanted another opinion. Okay, so that are the examples for stative verbs. Now let's move on to modal verbs. Modal verbs are auxiliary verbs that are used to express abilities, possibilities, permissions, and obligations. Okay, so modal verbs examples we have can, must, may, should, would. The modal verb examples in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. So this one, he can shoot a 3-point shot easily. The auxiliary verb can is expressing an ability, suggesting that shooting a 3-point shot is a skill the subject possesses. Okay, please note that in the case of should and must in the examples below, the modal verbs are expressing obligations, whereas would and may are expressing possibilities. This one, I should go home. You must not delay. You must not delay. Sally would not recommend the sushi. David may be late. Okay, so this one, phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs aren't single words. Instead, they are combinations of words that are used together to take on a different meaning to that of the original verb. There are many examples of phrasal verbs, some of which have colloquial meanings, such as make up, hand in, bring up, point out, look forward to. Each time the verb takes the extra word or words, it takes on a new meaning. For example, make without the up expresses that something is being created. Whereas with makeup, the suggestion is that there are some lies or fantastical element of the story, and make out can mean either to grasp or see something difficult or to kiss passionately. Okay, so phrasal verbs examples. Okay, phrasal verb examples, we have run out, go all out, make out, hand out, bring out, phase up, think through. The phrasal verb examples in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. Mary looked forward to her high school reunion. Mary looked forward to her high school reunion. The verb look has taken on forward to become a phrasal verb, meaning to be excited or eagerly await something. He brought up the same points again and again. Leroy handed in the wallet to the police. I make up stories all the time. She pointed out Donald's mistake. Okay, now let's move on to irregular verbs. Irregular verbs are those that don't take on the regular spelling patterns of past simple and past participle verbs. Unfortunately, there are hundreds of irregular verbs in the English language. But don't worry, while many are used often, the majority are not in common usage. Or if they are, you will use them so often, you will learn them quickly. Some of the most common irregular verbs include say, make, go, take, come, know, and see. Regular verb examples, we have eat, think, bring, hold, bear, buy, lay, catch, drive, paid, feel, redo. The irregular verbs examples in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. For this one, we have I take my time when I go to the shops. I take my time is a present tense. I took my time when I went to the shops. This is a past tense. Okay, so took and then went. This one is a present tense, take and then go. Julie makes cake for the classroom. This is a present tense, makes. Julie made a cake for the classroom. This is the past tense. You should also remember that auxiliary verbs do and have are also irregular verbs. I do agree. He does it often. We have done our homework early. They do their homework on Fridays. I have a suspicion about Fran. Fran has a diffuse look. We have no money left. They have had a cough twice this winter. Okay, now let's review what are those types of verbs. Okay, so for this one, we have, verb types. We have action verbs, transitive verbs, intransitive verbs. We have auxiliary verbs. We also have stative verbs, modal verbs, and phrasal verbs. Okay, the last but not the least, we have irregular verbs. Okay, so and if you find this video helpful and informational, please consider giving this one a thumbs up and please consider subscribing so that you'll be updated for more. Okay, thank you so much and have a great day. Goodbye.